Alright guys, let's talk about items that you should actually delete. So basically what I mean by this is just sell it to the vendor or just salvage it. And the reason why is because these items are essentially going to be worthless to, I want to say, majority of the player base. Now, usually I start off the video by saying like in 99% of circumstances, these are going to be bad. However, there are some niche builds. So I'm going to say like the top like 95% of players will not want these items. And basically it comes down to these certain roles. So it's basically going to save you some inventory space because like a lot of players, we list our items on some sort of trig website, or maybe we're saving them for another build. I'm telling you guys to delete these items because unless you really got like a top tier like niche player, and most of the time with those sort of niche builds, they'll just kind of lowball offers, but in general, you'll see items listed for crazy amounts that are actually not very good. You can see like this ring over here on the right side where it's listed over here for like 4 billion gold, and life per second, damage, resource cost reduction. These are not stats that people are looking for. So the point of this video is for items to actually just get rid of these, or essentially lower your price and expectations on what you are going to receive if you are trying to trade these items, because they do not hold value if they happen to hit multiple of these stats. And the reason why I'm mentioning multiple of these stats is because the first pair of pants over here, plus to strength, is totally great out of greater affix, but that ranks to bash is actually what makes these pants actually worth something. But the life per second is basically a role that people do not want. There's going to be almost no one that really is looking for that specific role on the pants, because a lot of times you want some sort of resistances. Maybe you need that one armor to go ahead and armor cap, or whatever the case may be. But that one stat is not essentially going to be a greater affix because it's going to be re-rolled into something else. Now, even if you had a +4 to bash, let's say we take this for example, we take the 4 to bash, and then we go ahead and have, let's say, life on kill, or we have some other stat that is worthless. Basically 2 worthless stats, but we have that plus ranks to bash. The player cannot then re-roll 2 of the stats to actually make it a good like best in slot item. They're essentially rolling around with one stat, one affix that is essentially worthless. So that's the point of this video. I actually have a video that I can very highly recommend you guys to check out as well. I'll link it down below, but it's going over the best items to actually go ahead and actually pick up and save to actually trade or use them for other builds. But there are certain things in this game which have a higher weight chance. So to explain this, I'm going to actually bring up this website called Path of Exile. It's for Path of Exile because Diablo doesn't officially post their item weights. So what I mean by an item weight is to determine how rare and how powerful an item is in terms of what it can be worth in gold actually has to do with the weight of whatever is being rolled. If you play Diablo, you probably noticed that getting the ranks to a very specific skill on Amulet is incredibly rare, while getting something like maximum life or resistances or your main stat, which could be strength, dexterity, intelligence, willpower, all of those are actually really easy to hit. There is something in the game for item weights. Again, this is unknown, but the higher the item weight, the higher the chance that it could roll. Now, even though this is again Path of Exile and this is a completely different game, I'm just trying to give you guys the idea. The chances of it to hit +3 on a rank to skill, or a +2 that you would then rank up, is significantly lower than +2 dexterity or strength or maximum life. There are things that are easier to roll than others, so that would make the item worth a lot more or less depending on the roll. So to kind of explain this over here, is it really comes down to also the meta of the game. So whatever is the meta is usually going to be the most expensive. So ideally, you would want to go ahead and get things for the meta that would actually hold value, because again, that's what people want. So what I've actually built over here is basically a bunch of items. Obviously everything would be legendary because rare and blue items are worthless, but to save you from the clutter of the screen, I'm going to go ahead and use this as an example because I get asked all the time, Slager, hey, I just got this like triple greater affix thing, is this good? And I have to tell them, no, it's absolute garbage, like throw this away. Just because it's a triple greater affix does not mean that the item is good. So to take, for example, this chest piece over here that's triple greater affix, right? We got thorns, life per second, impairment reduction. Now, which of those stats would actually be used in a meta build? The answer is none. The reason why is, if you might be thinking, wait, thorns is a meta build, right? Well, thorns does have a meta place, but if you're playing with a thorns build, you 100% have the razor plate. So there's no point of replacing razor plate. Like there's no way that you would replace Razor Plate in a Thorns build, so this chest armor is essentially useless. Life per second is not a good roll, neither is impairment reduction. Now let's say I had plus ranks to a very specific skill instead of Thorns, right? So let's say there was a Barb and he had, instead of Thorns, because let's say, you know, they weren't playing Thorns, and they got a greater affix of something else. Now would the item be good? Let's say, you know, Iron Skin is a pretty good skill, but let's say they had plus ranks to Iron Skin. Let's say that for the sake of this, it's even greater affix. Not that it really matters too much, but is this item good now? Well, even if there was someone that was out there trying to buy a plus ranks to Iron Skin, or let's say Dark Shroud for a Rogue, the other two stats, impairment and life per second, they're worthless. This item essentially doesn't really become a really good item, and its value is significantly diminished because of those two stats. Now, for the most part, there's no one that's stacking a bunch of life per second, and then they're also running like healing per received. Like, it's very rare that anyone is playing some of these things. So again, this is going to be for basically the 95% of the player base, so take it with a grain of salt. If there's some sort of niche build that really needs life per second, yeah, they may be interested in purchasing greater affix, life per second, and then like, you know, healing received or whatever. But for the most part, no one's really looking for that. So that's the point of this video. So I know this video has a really long introduction, but I have to kind of get that across. So let's start off with every single category here, and some of these can like roll in different categories. So for example, impairment reduction is kind of useless for the most part. It's a stat that is pretty much just rolled off in most circumstances. In the helmet category, usually it's like cooldown reduction, you can get some sort of resistances. That's what people are kind of looking for. Now, as far as the chest piece, again, there's a lot of overlaps. There's a lot of these where you can roll it in multiple areas, but for the most part in Helm, a lot of people will be looking for Harlequin anyways. It's really hard to honestly sell a helmet in this game because, again, most people will just be using the Harlequin. But as far as like the chest piece goes, and I don't want to make this video basically a repeat of like all of the best stats. It's basically just going over the bad stats. So getting anything with like life per second, impairment reduction, or ranks to a skill that someone can't use, even if there is one good stat on the item. Let's say for whatever reason, like we got plus to strength instead of Iron Skin. Okay, so I'm just gonna fully do this just so the video like makes a little bit more sense here. So let's say someone was really excited and they got like a greater affix strength. Is this item now good? No, the answer is because strength is such a common thing that it doesn't matter. Now, this is different though when we get to the pants, because you could essentially have a pair of pants that have, let's say it has healing received, right? And that's a stat that people would normally not want. But then you add that plus ranks to bash, and if that is a greater affix, people will spend 100 mil plus on a +4 bash, even with one bad stat, because the other stat, whatever it is, you re-roll it. Most of the time people would roll off the healing received, but if it's, let's say it had like plus to strength or plus to vitality, they call it life, so same thing, right? But like if it had bash, strength, and then the healing received, you might think, okay, that's Slager said that that's the bad stat, right? Is this item worthless? No, because as long as two of the stats out of the three are good, then the item is a W. It doesn't matter if the other one's a greater affix, you just re-roll that. It doesn't re-roll into a greater affix, but essentially you still have a really good best in slot item because you would re-roll the healing received into, let's say, a resistance or whatever the case may be. So as long as the item has two good stats, and ideally one of them is greater affixed, because most people are not even really interested in buying items that are not greater affixed. There are people out there that, you know, maybe they only have couple 100,000 gold, but for the most part, people don't really engage in trade unless it's like millions of gold. That's just the reality of the game. So don't save items. Let's say we looked at this item right here and it was not greater affix on bash. Would I even save this item? I might just give it away. A lot of times with extra items, I'll just give them away on stream because I don't need them, so I'll just throw them on the ground. I'm like, here, anyone want this, right? I do loot share all the time. So if someone needs it, it's okay, but I wouldn't hold on to this trying to sell it for like 1 billion plus gold if it's not greater affixed on that one. Like greater affix healing received is nothing, and greater affix on like, let's say, maximum life or strength is still good in this circumstance because the plus to bash can still be okay, but again, the healing received is a stat that you would just roll off, so it's still okay. Hopefully this makes sense, but I know there's just so much to go into it. Now, as far as gloves go, there are some more niche ones that I wanted to go over. And what it comes down to is gloves in this game are usually going to be used for attack speed, crit strike chance, and lucky hit, or if you need some sort of damage that you can actually use in a build. So what I mean by that is, let's say you're playing Heartseeker Rogue, you want to stack all the vulnerable damage. If you're playing other builds that may stack crit strike damage, well then you'd apply that if you're playing a Precision Rogue, or whatever the ranks to skills would be. So a lot of times with the gloves, there's not really that many room for any sort of defensive stats at all. It is basically ranks to skills, crit strike chance, attack speed, lucky hit in most circumstances. Again, this is for like 95% of the player base, but you generally don't want to have like resistance and then like life. And then even if you hit a greater affix on ranks to, let's say, a core skill, like let's say you had like frozen orb, right? Well, we're playing barb, so it won't roll a frozen orb, but you get the idea. If it has, let's say, ranks to frozen orb, lightning resist, and another like defensive stat, well, the item cannot be good. But if it had, well, let's say that for whatever reason, for the sake of the video, let's say that Hammer of the Ancients was like the meta, right? Let's say that this was good. And you're like, wow, I got a greater affix, Hammer of the Ancient, lightning resistance, and then we have like armor. Is this good? Well, the thing is that you're missing 2 of the stats and you cannot reroll 2, so the item is essentially bad. Hopefully this makes a little bit more sense now. But in general, yeah, that's kind of what you want in gloves. As far as boots go, you have to really have movement speed for a lot of the player base. Now, this is where it gets a little bit different. For the highest pit pushing builds, you actually don't really care too much about movement speed. But for a majority of the player base, movement speed is an absolute must. And for the most part, just like in Path of Exile, if the boots, for whatever reason, do not have, let's say, like the greater affix of movement speed, a lot of times these get skipped over. People start, like as far as their searches go, they will usually start off with greater affix movement speed and then kind of look at what else they want for their build. Could be armor, could be life, could be main stat, but for the most part, getting movement speed is definitely key for a lot of builds, and it actually does help out with survivability, surprisingly, even in the higher tier of pits. But there are other builds that I've seen that are in the top ranks that don't actually put in movement speed because their whole build needs as much DPS as possible, and a lot of people run inner calm, so they're going to hold still anyways to min-max on DPS. That's like the one little exception here, but I'm mentioning it so now you guys know. Now, as far as weapons, let's go over this. There are so many garbage stats on weapons, specifically life on hit and fury on kill, or mana on kill, energy on kill. Those stats are absolutely terrible, considering this is a two-hander that only rolls with a maximum of 4 fury on kill. And again, most people, if you're looking at the meta, they're playing Bash Barb, they're playing Heartseeker Rogue. They don't use resource anyways, so it does not matter. Now, there could be some niche build that runs Melted Hardest Leg and they want the fury on kill, whatever. Okay, I get it. But for the most part, getting 2 of these stats, even if you get like a greater affix on, let's say, like strength or something, it's so common, it's not even worth keeping. Just get rid of it if it has 2 of those bad stats on it. But overall, if you just get a weapon with, let's say, strength, life, and then you get a greater affix on whatever the other thing is, if that greater affix is good, then the item can still be utilized, and it's not bad at all. Like, if you got an item, let me show you guys like an example over here of an item that would still be good, even though it has, let's say, 1 of the bad stats. And this is like a very, very common thing. So damage over time in most builds is, for the most part, there's not that many dot builds in the game, but there are, again, that's why I'm saying, like, for 95% of the player base here. So let's say we get an item that has, like, strength over here, and then we get fury on kill and life on kill. That makes the item, like, bad, right? But if, let's say we also had, like, a life roll, but we still have that 1 life on kill, and 1 of these is greater affix. If 2 of these are greater affix, it's still a good item. Fantastic. Let's say we only hit 1 greater affix on either one of those. The item is still good because that life on hit, again, you can re-roll it. I'm really trying to emphasize the point of you can't reroll 2 things, therefore, if it rolls 2 bad things, it's not good. And I know I'm kind of repeating myself, but I really need to stress this as it's something that I get asked all the time in stream. Hey, Sladra, I just got this item. Did I win the lottery? And it's something that looks like this. And I'm like, no, it's just merch it off. You could try to list it, and if there's someone that needs, again, a very niche build, maybe. But the chances of that is just that it's going to clog up your inventory and it's a waste of space. Another thing that rolls on a lot of pieces of gear that is absolutely worthless for a lot of builds is overpower damage. I understand, sure, there are builds that can use overpower, but in the mass majority, there is not that many builds that are playing overpower. There are some builds that can make use of Band of Swords Talisman, maybe the Pulverized Druid, but in reality, well, it's kind of Wind Shear Druid and Tornado Druid, and those don't really make use of overpower. So anything with plus to overpower is another stat that is kind of like a just reroll it. It's garbage. That's the reality of it, right? And then, again, this is like another thing where I've seen some people like, dude, did I just hit a jackpot? I got Fury on kill, resource cost reduction. Again, look at the meta. Bash Barb is the meta. Maybe if you're playing some sort of whirlwind build and you just want to hold it down for open world content with like Tyraels, sure. But is someone really worth, is that worth paying like a couple billion for? Absolutely not. It's more of an item that I would just give away. I've given away multiple triple like greater affixes, and people get excited. I'm like, hey, anyone want this? Someone sees it and they're like, wow, I want it so bad. And I'm glad they get excited, but it's really not worth anything. But other things that can roll on amulets that are pretty bad. Again, it's Fury on kill, life on kill. Same thing with rings. With rings, you generally want like attack speed. You want that crit hit chance. And then if there's some sort of other damage type that can be okay, then that would be good for your build. But again, with like the amulet, you usually want ranks to skills. That's essentially what's going to take it from like maybe it's worth like, 5 to, let's say, 50 million to in the 100 mil to a billion. It really comes down to the plus ranks of skills, especially on anything that's related to rogue. The amulet's price is crazy. If you look at like any like the prices for specifically like the rogue stuff, it just goes absolutely crazy because again, it is worth so much. But that's going to pretty much wrap up the video. Those are the stats that you do not want to get. Basically, I'm trying to save you guys storage space and save the server space of listing items like this that just will realistically never sell, and like this. They're bad. So basically, delete these items if you get these, or just merch them off for gold because no one's realistically looking for them. But hopefully this video was informative. If you guys learned something new or felt like I missed out on anything else that was really bad, let me know in the comment section below. But there's the guide for you guys, because I promised you guys I'd make one to go over the items that a lot of people may think that they're good, but they're just honestly bad. But if you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like on it. If you're new here, subscribe, turn that bell, and you'll definitely see more very soon. Take care, and I'm out. Peace.